Welcome to episode 133 of the asiCast. Now, if you've been listening to or watching our last couple of episodes, you'll know that there's a lot going on in US TV measurement at the moment, with measurement initiatives from the ANA and NBC and new announcements from Nielsen around Nielsen One. So we thought now might be a good time to get Nielsen's perspective on the future of US measurement. And joining me today is Kim Gilberti, who's SVP of Product Management at Nielsen. So hello, Kimberly.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, recently, Nielsen announced a move from average ad break ratings to actual spot ratings for individual ads. How are broadcast TV ratings in the US calculated at the moment, and what exactly does this change involve?
Sure. So in the US today, our measurement is based on what we refer to as average minute. So essentially, within any given minute of content or tuning happening, we credit only one publisher. So if you watch 45 seconds of ESPN and then you watch 15 seconds of CNN, ESPN gets credit for that entire minute. Then on top of that, the way the industry generally transacts is against what we refer to as our ACM, or average commercial minute ratings. And what that is essentially the average of all commercial minutes within a program averaged together. So if you are Pepsi and you have an ad that you've placed during a particular program, the number that you're going to post against is actually based on the average of all of the minutes within that telecast that had commercials. And that is a metric that the industry aligned on, many years ago at this point, across buyers and sellers, as a way really to sort of take into consideration time-shifted viewing, which was, a newfangled thing at the time. And C3, as the 3 implies, is inclusive of 3 days of time-shifted viewing. So that's the metric that the industry has been buying and selling on for quite some time. But certainly as the world has evolved, as the industry has evolved, and certainly as digital has become, at the forefront, that comparability between the way we measure television and the way we measure digital really needs to come closer together. And that's why we're moving toward a more individual commercial metric, so that it is a metric that you really can compare to the second level measurement that digital has always been. And it really will also open up opportunities to do things like linear addressable and dynamic ad insertion on the linear TV side without, obviously doing anything that would compromise the metrics that the linear advertiser is posting against.
So presumably this is more about what the industry in the US is willing to accept as opposed to Nielsen's technical capabilities, because you've been offering spot ratings in other markets for up to 20 years now. Is this a new technology, or more about moving the industry in the US more towards a digital way of doing things?
So the primary driver truly is about what the industry is asking for and what the industry needs. And one of the sort of the big technological changes that has happened in recent past is really on the ad tech side and the ability to insert addressable ads into the linear stream. So when you end up in a world where the same ad is not really being seen by every single consumer watching a given piece of content, that does require more granular measurement, more specificity in terms of what ad is actually being viewed. There is a technical metering Nielsen aspect to it as well. The way that our US-based measurement works is it's based on something called a watermark, which is actual encoding that goes into the stream. So we know very definitively, what is being watched and at what time it's being watched. And the way we credit those watermarks to determine, who is actually, what content is actually being viewed, right now is looking at a level of granularity that is less than a minute, but not quite the individual spot level. So we need some enhancements in that space from a technical point of view to get there. Same thing for what we use in the absence of a watermark, which is something called a signature, which essentially is like a fingerprint of the audio that's occurring at the time. And again, we want to make sure that we're able to capture with that technology very short duration events, because the commercial obviously can be 10 seconds, let's say. And if someone sees that ad, changes the channel, comes back after they've, consumed whatever it is they choose to consume, we don't want to lose those edges. So it is driven largely by a desire from the industry to move to something more granular, but there is a technical aspect to it as well that Nielsen's been investing in and working on.
So is the industry bought into this then? Because I notice in the announcement you're quite careful in the wording and say things like allowing for a future where audience estimates are, but does that imply that it's still for the broadcasters to decide whether they want this or not, or is there general agreement now that this is what the networks want Nielsen to be measuring, sub-minute TV ratings?
Sure. So again, our clients have been pretty clear about the desire for linear addressable. And certainly I think the industry has been very clear about the need to really be able to understand audiences across platforms. The world between TV and digital blurs a little bit more and more every single day. So I don't think there's any question about the need to go there and the importance of the fidelity of measurement being that granular and that comparable, both on the buy side as well as the sell side. We also recognize that the industry has been transacting the way it transacts for a really, really long time. So we don't want to obviously break anything or disrupt things in a way that's going to make the business more difficult, which is why there will be a fairly lengthy parallel period. We're planning to launch this service inclusive of this more granular ratings data at the end of 22. And we don't anticipate actually changing the quote currency, so completely changing over to the new measurement until the fall of 24. So we want to give the industry the runway that it will need in order to adapt. But I don't think there's any question of the need to, obviously be able to look at data across platforms in a way that is as close to apples as we can reasonably get.
And presumably your global clients will know that around the world, spot ratings are the norm. So presumably they're welcoming the US actually coming into line with what's been available elsewhere for decades.
So again, every country is a little bit different. I think certainly the more consistency there is globally, obviously, the better. But different countries have different rules. There's different levels of aggregation that are done just based, again, on what is the need of that particular country. So what we envision here is obviously in many ways going to bring things closer in line where that makes sense. But we also respect, of course, the needs of the individual markets.
Because I think certainly there's a desire amongst global advertisers to have much more consistency. So I guess this is to be welcomed in terms of bringing the world's biggest ad market into line with those global comparisons. Now, you mentioned that obviously a move towards actual ad ratings as opposed to ad break ratings will make comparisons with online video easier. And the ANA is currently investigating options for cross-media measurement in the US. We had Natalie Bourdet speak at our event last month about what they're doing. How does Nielsen One fit into that picture? Is it primarily about cross-platform video, or is it a potential building block for a full cross-media measurement system?
Sure. So we're very much involved with what the WFA and the ANA are doing. And, we're obviously always a fan of anything that's going to make the process and the ecosystem across platforms easier. What the WFA is focused on is a little bit different than what we're maybe more holistically focused on as part of Nielsen One and as part of, the change to the way we measure linear television. They're focused a bit more on standardizing data delivery across platforms for advertisers. So it's sort of an element of ultimately what makes cross-platform easier. What we're focused on is, obviously independent third-party measurement. That's what we do. But we basically are participating there because anything that accelerates that process, that makes the ecosystem simpler, easier, faster for the world to consume, that's what we're here for. So very much involved with the WFA ANA, but the Nielsen One vision is a little bit more, I'll say, cross-media, cross-platform measurement centric.
Isn't that, so I'm not sure I quite understand, because isn't that what our understanding of what the WFA is? Cross-platform, cross-media measurement. I'm not sure I totally understand the difference.
What they're doing is a bit more, again, about standardization of data across those platforms, because again, when it comes to targeting and things of that nature, there are so many different identifiers and identity spines and different things that come into play in order to actually get the ecosystem aligned, so that if you are trying to reach a certain type of viewer, how that actually can happen across all these different platforms. Nielsen One, which is the moniker that we use in the US for this initiative and for what we envision as our sort of cross-platform, cross-media measurement, is a little bit more about measuring the outcome of that. So what actually happened, when there was an ad campaign and people were viewing the Tide ad across linear television, computer, mobile, CTV, wherever.
Measuring sales or outcomes?
Measuring campaign performance, measuring outcomes, ROI, all of those types of things are elements of what we anticipate. Obviously, people will do with the data. Nielsen one is divided up into a few different modules, if you will, or different capabilities and offerings. One piece of it is campaign measurement, so understanding the outcome of an ad campaign. What was your reach? What was your frequency? Things of that nature. We also are in the process also for Nielsen one of measuring content. So how does the life cycle of a piece of content look across platforms? So if you've watched This Is Us on linear television, you watched it on Hulu, you watched it on your, did you watch it on your mobile device? Did you watch it on the big screen? So understanding sort of the life cycle of content across all the different places and forms in which it can be consumed. There's also a planning aspect to it. So how do I sort of predict for the future, and how do I plan against what I think my audiences might look like, as I head into the next month or the next quarter or the next year? And then also an analytics function to really deep dive into the data and sort of find those stories, find those strengths, try to understand the strength of one platform versus another. So lots of components ultimately to what Nielsen One will ultimately be, but it all starts with that comparability of having data across all of these different platforms that are, as close to apples as can reasonably occur. So again, that's where the granular measurement on the TV side comes into play, getting down to that specificity of the individual commercials and being able to track a campaign, anywhere that it happens to be consumed.
And certainly the MRC has been giving guidance around minimum definitions of exposure and viewability.
Right.
I know that our mainly international audience are aware from press clippings that the MRC recently withheld accreditation for the Nielsen TV rating service following some panel balance issues related to the pandemic, which obviously hit the industry in all sorts of different ways. But how did it specifically impact your ability to do the ratings, and how are you now addressing those concerns?
Sure. So the pandemic, obviously unprecedented, and really we had to think about our existing service in context of a world where we were used to going into people's homes to install new equipment, to manage equipment, et cetera. And obviously our first priority had to be the safety of our panelists, the safety of our employees, and it required us to do things quite differently during such a challenging time. It came with a lot of innovation. We did a lot of really cool things to really help mitigate some of the issues obviously that occur with not being able, of course, to enter people's homes. So a lot of innovation around remote recruitment, remote installation of meters, things of that nature. But obviously there were some challenges associated with that as well. We did see declines in sample size for one, again, just not being able to install as many new homes as we otherwise would have, and seeing certain homes that had been in the sample fall out, which naturally happens over time. But of course, when you can't replace them as quickly with new homes, the net that you'll see is a decline in sample size. So that was one of the areas that obviously the MRC is very interested in, is seeing us return the sample size back to our target levels, and also getting back to the maintenance of homes the way that we traditionally obviously would do it. By obviously being able to enter the home where necessary in order to monitor a new piece of equipment or address an issue that may be occurring, things of that nature. So that's been a key part, and obviously we've been making great strides in getting the sample size back up to those target levels. The other pieces of the puzzle that the MRC has cited and that we're working very closely with them and with our clients on are really in light obviously of the pandemic, really taking a good look at our business continuity and recovery processes and saying what are things that we can and should do. We should, God forbid, anything like this occur again, to really shore up what we do in these sort of unusual situations. And then also really a strong initiative around communication. Again, very strange times. We had to make a lot of decisions on the fly. in order to really just, continue processing, to continue to provide the data that our clients need. And we followed what I would categorize as sort of traditional communication means of how we do that. What we realize, of course, in retrospect, is that giving more information to our clients, even at the most granular level of detail. So there's really a deeper understanding of the changes that had to be made. Communicating that more broadly in different forums is also something that we agree with the MRC is very important, and we're putting new procedures in place around that as well. So those are really the categories of things I would say, that the MRC has noted to us and that we've been working very closely with them on. We're obviously extremely committed to the MRC process. We, understand, of course, the value in being audited and accredited by an independent service. So, we're working very closely with them in order to regain those check marks. And that's obviously our objective.
Mm. It has prompted NBC to hold a tender for audience measurement. They claimed dramatically, with a folder full of paper, that they had over 100 submissions so far for this. How does the Nielsen ratings service fit into that initiative? Because I know, just to remind international viewers and listeners, there's not a JIC type situation where you bid for an audience measurement contract. You have individual contracts with all the broadcasters, so it's not necessarily a situation like in many countries where there's a bid to be the provider, but obviously it's something that is getting a lot of international coverage at the moment. I mean, how does the Nielsen rating service fit into that initiative?
Sure. So look, we have a very long-standing relationship with NBC. They've been a client of ours for many, many, many years. We participated in the RFP. We did obviously submit as part of that as well. And a lot of what they're looking for and a lot of the information that they're trying to sort of gather around the industry falls largely into the category of things, of course, that Nielsen can do. I think Nielsen is unique in that of the many things included in the RFP, we really do play in all of those spaces. And we obviously see the value of, obviously independent measurement across, a variety of publishers and the ability to really have a sort of a consistency of methodology and a consistency of data assets across all of these different components. So, obviously we participated with, what we have to offer, which we think is pretty strong. So, but again, NBC is a great partner, always has been, and we, look forward to continuing to work with them.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a lot going on in terms of US measurements at the moment. It must be hard to keep a track on all the different initiatives that are going on, as well as running a service. But thanks for taking the time out from doing that to speak to us this afternoon. Well, afternoon our time. I think it's morning your time. But, and we'll check back in hopefully in a few months just to see how things are developing. But thanks for your time in the meantime.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Take care.